Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the human exploration vessel Wanderer, watching the swirling purple and gold planet grow larger on the main screen. 3 years of deep space travel had led them here, to Zephyria Prime, home to one of the most beautiful species the galaxy had ever known. The Zephyrians were legendary throughout the known systems. Their crystalline skin caught light like living diamonds. Their voices could make grown warriors weep with joy, and their graceful movements had inspired countless works of art across dozens of worlds. They were so beautiful that most species could barely function in their presence. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," announced Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and suddenly, the bridge was filled with the most gorgeous being Sarah had ever seen. The Zephyrian ambassador had skin that shifted between silver and blue, large violet eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages, and features so perfect they looked carved by master artists. "Greetings, humans," the ambassador spoke, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I am Ambassador Lyralii. We welcome you to our system, though we must warn you of something important." Sarah felt her crew stirring behind her. She could hear quiet gasps and murmurs of amazement. Even through the screen, the Zephyrian's beauty was overwhelming. "What warning, Ambassador?" Sarah managed to ask, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Your species is unique. Most beings who meet us in person cannot handle our presence. They become lost in what they call our beauty, unable to think or act normally. Some have even fainted or become permanently affected. We have learned to keep meetings brief and distant for everyone's safety." Dr. Marcus Webb, the ship's xenobiologist, stepped forward. "We appreciate the warning, Ambassador. However, humans have encountered many species. We believe we can handle diplomatic contact." Lyralii's expression showed something that might have been concern, though it was hard to tell through her alien features. "You do not understand. Even the mighty Caraxians, who pride themselves on mental strength, could not remain standing in our presence." The elegant Vorthai, known for their composure, became speechless and unmoving. "Your species is still young to galactic politics. Perhaps it would be better to conduct all meetings through video channels." Sarah felt something stir in her chest. It was the same feeling she'd had when other species had told humans they weren't ready for space travel, weren't smart enough for advanced technology, or weren't strong enough for frontier exploration. Humans had proven them wrong every time. "With respect, Ambassador, we'd like to try an in-person meeting. We understand the risks." The Zephyrian's violet eyes widened slightly. "You truly wish to attempt this? Very well, but we insist on precautions. Only 3 of your people may come to the surface, and our medical teams will be standing by. The meeting will be limited to 1 hour. Do you agree to these terms?" "Agreed," Sarah replied without hesitation. After the transmission ended, the bridge erupted in quiet discussions. Sarah turned to address her crew. "I need volunteers for the diplomatic team. Dr. Webb, you're a xenobiologist, so you're coming. I need 1 more person." "I'll go, Captain," said Chief Engineer Tom Morrison, a gruff man in his 50s who had seen everything the galaxy could throw at humans. "Been dealing with supposedly impossible situations my whole career." "Very well. We beam down in 2 hours. Everyone else, maintain standard orbit and monitor communications." As the crew prepared, Dr. Webb ran every test he could think of on the 3 volunteers. He checked their mental state, physical condition, and psychological profiles. "Interesting," he muttered, reviewing the results. "Humans seem to process beauty differently than other species. Our brains don't have the same overwhelming response to perfection that many aliens do. It might be because we evolved appreciating diversity rather than a single standard of beauty." 2 hours later, Sarah, Dr. Webb, and Chief Morrison stood on the transporter pad. The Zephyrian coordinates had been locked in, and the planet's surface awaited them. "Remember," Dr. Webb said as the transporter hummed to life, "stay focused on the mission. Don't stare too long at any one individual. Try to maintain professional composure." The world around them dissolved into sparkling light, and Moments later, they materialized on Zephyria Prime. The first thing Sarah noticed was how everything seemed to glow with soft, natural light. The buildings were made of some kind of crystal that caught and reflected sunlight in beautiful patterns. Gardens filled with luminescent plants lined perfectly designed pathways. The air itself seemed to shimmer. But it was the Zephyrians themselves that took her breath away. They moved like liquid light, their crystalline skin reflecting the environment around them in constantly shifting patterns. Their voices, even in simple conversation, created harmonies that seemed to resonate in Sarah's chest. Every gesture was perfectly graceful, every expression hauntingly beautiful. And yet, after the initial moment of awe, Sarah found she could think clearly. The beauty was stunning, yes, but it didn't overwhelm her mind or make her unable to function. She glanced at her companions and saw they were having similar reactions, impressed and awed, but still in control of themselves. Ambassador Lyralii approached them, and Sarah could see surprise in those violet eyes. "You are still standing," Lyralii observed, her melodic voice filled with wonder. "Still speaking. How is this possible?" Chief Morrison chuckled, a sound that seemed oddly normal in this ethereal place. "Ma'am, I've been married to my wife for 30 years. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, but I still manage to take out the garbage and fix the replicator when it breaks." Dr. Webb was busy scanning the area with his tricorder, completely focused on his scientific work despite being surrounded by beings of impossible beauty. "Fascinating biosignatures," he muttered. "The crystalline structure seems to be naturally occurring, not technological." Lyralii looked from one human to another, her expression showing increasing amazement. "In 3,000 years of galactic contact, no species has ever reacted this way. You see us clearly, appreciate our forms, and yet you remain yourselves." Sarah nodded. "We see that you're beautiful, Ambassador. Remarkably so, but beauty doesn't make us stop being human. We can appreciate something wonderful while still maintaining our purpose and identity." Other Zephyrians had begun gathering at a respectful distance, watching the humans with curiosity and amazement. Sarah could hear their musical voices creating a background symphony of wonder. "They speak while looking at us directly," one whispered in melodic tones. "They move normally, without stumbling or staring," said another. "How are they not overwhelmed?" asked a third. Ambassador Lyralii gestured for the humans to follow her toward a beautiful building that seemed to be grown rather than built. "Come, we must document this extraordinary event. Our scientists want to study this phenomenon." As they walked, Dr. Webb continued his observations. "I'm detecting some kind of natural bioluminescence in your skin structure. It's quite remarkable. Do you control this consciously?" "To some degree, yes," Lyralii replied, her skin shifting to warmer tones as she spoke. "It reflects our emotional states and helps with communication. But I must ask you, Dr. Webb, how are you able to focus on scientific matters while in our presence? Most researchers become too distracted to function." "Well," Dr. Webb adjusted his glasses, "beauty is certainly scientifically interesting, but so are a lot of other things. Your bioluminescence, for instance, suggests some fascinating evolutionary adaptations. I'm curious about your social structures and how they developed around your natural gifts." Chief Morrison was examining the crystal architecture with professional interest. "This construction is incredible," he said, running his hand along a wall that seemed to pulse with gentle light. "The structural integrity must be amazing. What kind of foundational systems do you use?" The humans' practical reactions seemed to delight and confuse the Zephyrians in equal measure. They had built their entire society around the assumption that their beauty would overwhelm other species, making normal interaction impossible. "Your people truly are unique," Lyralii said as they entered the building. "We have developed elaborate protocols for dealing with other species, short meetings, protective screens, distance communication, all because direct contact renders them unable to function." Yet you three walk among us as easily as if we were any other people. Sarah looked around at the gathered Zephyrians, all watching them with fascination. Maybe that's because, to us, you are just people. Beautiful people, certainly, but still people with thoughts, feelings, and purposes beyond your appearance. One young Zephyrian stepped forward, her skin glowing bright with excitement. "You really see us as more than our beauty?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. "Of course," Sarah replied. "Beauty is wonderful, but it's just one aspect of who someone is. We're more interested in learning about your culture, your history, your science, your dreams for the future." The young Zephyrian turned to her companions, speaking rapidly in their musical language. Sarah's translator caught fragments. "They see us more than appearance, interested in our thoughts." Dr. Webb had found a group of Zephyrian scientists and was deep in conversation with them about their bioluminescent properties and crystalline bone structure. Chief Morrison was discussing construction techniques with their architects. Both men were treating their hosts as colleagues and equals rather than as untouchable objects of beauty. Ambassador Lyralii led Sarah to a terrace overlooking the city. "Captain Shun, I must confess something to you. Our beauty has been both a gift and a curse. Other species either worship us from afar or avoid us entirely because they cannot handle direct contact. We have been lonely, isolated by the very gift that makes us unique." Sarah looked out over the glowing city, then back at Lyralii. "That must be difficult, being valued only for one thing, even if it's something wonderful." "Yes." Lyralii's voice carried a note of sadness that somehow made her even more beautiful. "We have so much we could share with the galaxy. Our music, our science, our philosophy. But other species are too overwhelmed by our appearance to engage with our minds or our culture." "Well," Sarah said with a smile, "humans specialize in seeing past the surface. We've learned that the most interesting things about people are usually found by getting to know them, not just by looking at them." The hour that had been allocated for the meeting passed quickly, with humans and Zephyrians engaged in normal, productive conversations. As the time came to leave, Ambassador Lyralii approached Sarah with an expression of genuine sadness. "Must you go so soon? This has been the most normal interaction we have had with another species in centuries." Sarah looked around at her crew members, both of whom were clearly reluctant to end their fascinating conversations. "We could extend our stay if you'd like. Our ship has plenty of supplies, and there seems to be a lot we could learn from each other." "You would do that?" Lyralii's skin brightened with hope. "You would stay longer, despite the risks of prolonged exposure to our presence." Chief Morrison looked up from his discussion with the architects. "Risks? The only risk I see is running out of things to talk about, and that doesn't seem likely anytime soon." Dr. Webb nodded enthusiastically. "The scientific collaboration opportunities alone would justify an extended stay. Your people's bioluminescence could revolutionize our understanding of organic light production." As the humans prepared to return to their ship to gather supplies for an extended stay, word of their unique immunity to Zephyrian beauty began spreading throughout the city. Crowds had gathered to see these strange beings who could look upon Zephyrians without being overwhelmed. "They speak to us as equals," one Zephyrian told another. "They see our minds, not just our forms," replied her companion. "Perhaps," said an elderly Zephyrian with skin that shimmered like starlight, "these humans could be the bridge we have long sought with the wider galaxy." Sarah activated her communicator as they prepared to beam back to the ship. "Wanderer, this is Captain Shun. Prepare for extended diplomatic mission. We're going to be here for a while." "Understood, Captain," came Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice. "How are you holding up down there? The reports about Zephyrian beauty are pretty intense." Sarah looked around at the gathered Zephyrians, all watching hopefully, and smiled. "We're doing just fine, Lieutenant. In fact, I think we're about to make some very good friends." As the transporter beam began to take hold, Ambassador Lyralii called out one last question. "Captain Shun, how do we know this isn't some kind of temporary resistance? What if your immunity wears off?" Sarah's last words before the beam completed were, "Ambassador, humans have been dealing with beauty in all its forms for thousands of years. We've learned that real beauty comes from who you are, not just what you look like. That's not going to change anytime soon. When the humans materialized back on their ship, the bridge crew immediately surrounded them with questions. Are you all right? Were they really as beautiful as the reports say? Did you get overwhelmed? Dr. Webb was already pulling up his scientific readings. They exceeded every description we've heard. Absolutely stunning beings. And yes, we're fine. Better than fine, actually. We may have just discovered something very important about human psychology and our place in galactic society. Sarah moved to her captain's chair, mind already planning the extended mission ahead. All hands, this is the captain. We're going to be staying in the Zephyrian system for an extended diplomatic and scientific mission. What we've learned today could change how humans are perceived throughout the galaxy. She paused, looking at the planet growing larger on the screen as they prepared to establish orbit. It turns out that sometimes the very things that make other species different from us are exactly what we need to bridge the gaps between us. Prepare for extended operations. As the Wanderer settled into orbit around Zephyria Prime, Sarah couldn't help but smile. Once again, humans had proven that they couldn't be easily categorized or predicted. They had found a way to see past surface beauty to the people beneath, and in doing so had opened doors that had been closed to galactic society for thousands of years. The real adventure was just beginning. 3 days had passed since the humans first set foot on Zephyria Prime, and the planet was buzzing with excitement. Word had spread across the crystalline cities that a species had finally been found who could interact normally with the Zephyrians. Requests for meetings poured in from scientists, artists, philosophers, and citizens who had spent their lives isolated from meaningful contact with other species. Captain Sarah Chan sat in the newly established human embassy, a beautiful crystalline building that the Zephyrians had grown specifically for their guests. Through the transparent walls, she could see groups of Zephyrians gathering in the gardens outside, their skin patterns shifting with curiosity and hope. Captain Dr. Webb entered the room, his arms full of data tablets and scanning equipment. You need to see what we've discovered. The implications are extraordinary. Sarah looked up from the reports she was reviewing. What have you found, Doctor? It's not just that we can resist their beauty, Dr. Webb said, setting down his equipment and pulling up holographic displays. We're actually helping them in ways they never expected. Look at these readings. The hologram showed brain scans of Zephyrians before and after interacting with humans. Their neural activity shows increased complexity and engagement when talking to us. It's as if our normal reactions are allowing them to use parts of their minds that have been dormant. What do you mean? Dr. Webb highlighted sections of the brain scans. For thousands of years, Zephyrians have only had interactions where other species were overwhelmed by their appearance. They've had to suppress parts of their personalities, dumb down their communication, and avoid showing their full capabilities because other species couldn't handle the complete Zephyrian experience. Sarah studied the data. So by treating them normally, we're allowing them to be fully themselves for the first time in millennia. And the results are remarkable. Their scientists are proposing theories they've kept hidden for centuries. Their artists are creating works they never dared show other species. They're experiencing intellectual and emotional freedom they haven't had in generations. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry. Ambassador Lyralii appeared at the entrance, but she wasn't alone. Behind her were dozens of Zephyrians, all watching the humans with expressions of eager anticipation. Captain Shun, Lyralii said, her voice carrying excited harmonics that made the air shimmer. We have a request that may seem unusual. What can we do for you, Ambassador? We would like to hold what you might call a cultural exchange festival. For the first time in our history, we want to show another species who we really are, our music, our art, our science, our philosophy, everything we've had to hide because it was too overwhelming when combined with our physical appearance. Sarah looked at the crowd of hopeful faces behind the ambassador. That sounds wonderful. What would you need from us? Your presence, Lyralii replied simply. Your normal, honest reactions. You see, we've spent so long modifying our culture to avoid overwhelming other species that we've lost touch with what we're truly capable of. We need someone to witness our real selves and tell us truthfully what they think. Chief Morrison appeared from the engineering section of the building, where he had been working with Zephyrian architects to understand their crystal-growing technology. Did I hear something about a festival? Count me in. These folks have shown me construction techniques that could revolutionize human engineering. Dr. Webb nodded enthusiastically. The scientific presentations alone would be worth years of study. Captain, this could be the most significant cultural exchange in galactic history. Sarah stood up, addressing not just Ambassador Lyralii, but the entire crowd of Zephyrians visible through the transparent walls. We would be honored to participate in your cultural festival. When would you like to begin? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every Zephyrian in sight began glowing brighter, their skin patterns dancing with joy. The collective musical sound of their excited voices created a symphony that seemed to make the very air vibrate with happiness. Tomorrow, Lyralii said, her own glow so bright it cast rainbow patterns on the walls. We will begin tomorrow. The next morning, Sarah and her team were awakened by the most beautiful sound any of them had ever heard. The entire city was singing. Thousands of Zephyrian voices joined in harmonies so complex and moving that the humans found themselves fighting back tears. Captain, came Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice over the communicator. We're picking up the most incredible acoustic patterns from the planet's surface. The entire city seems to be singing. Sarah activated her communicator as she dressed for the day. That's correct, Lieutenant. It's the opening of their cultural festival. You and the rest of the crew are welcome to beam down and join us if you'd like. The whole crew, Captain. Are you sure it's safe? Sarah looked out her window at the Zephyrians gathering in the plaza below, their skin patterns creating a light show more beautiful than any aurora. Lieutenant, I'm beginning to think the only dangerous thing would be missing this. Within an hour, the entire crew of the Wanderer had beamed down to Zephyria Prime. Sarah watched with amusement and pride as her people interacted naturally with the Zephyrians, asking questions, showing genuine interest, and treating their hosts as the intelligent, complex beings they were. The festival began with what the Zephyrians called a revelation concert, on a stage made of living crystal that amplified and enhanced every sound. Zephyrian musicians performed pieces that had been considered too overwhelming for other species to experience. The music was unlike anything humans had ever heard. It wasn't just sound, it was a complete sensory experience. The musicians' bioluminescent skin responded to the music they played, creating visual symphonies that matched the audio. The crystal stage itself resonated with the performance, adding harmonic layers that seemed to reach into the listeners' souls. And yet, the humans remained functional throughout the entire performance. They applauded, cheered, and called for encores like any normal audience would. "This is impossible," whispered an elderly Zephyrian scientist named Thalorian, who had been studying interspecies psychology for 800 years. The Caraxian ambassadors fainted after just 30 seconds of our basic greeting songs. The Vorthai delegation became completely catatonic during a simple instrumental piece. Yet these humans are requesting specific compositions and asking about our techniques. Dr. Webb had positioned himself near the stage with recording equipment, completely absorbed in documenting the performance. When the concert ended, he immediately approached the musicians with technical questions. "The way you coordinate the bioluminescence with the musical tones is fascinating," he said to the lead performer, a Zephyrian whose skin shifted through every color of the spectrum as she played. "Is it conscious control or an automatic response?" The musician, whose name was Melodia, stared at him in amazement. "You want to know about the technical aspects? Not just how it makes you feel?" "Well, both, actually," Dr. Webb replied. "It's obviously beautiful and emotionally moving. But I'm also curious about the mechanism. Understanding how it works might help us appreciate it even more. Melodia's skin began cycling through rapid patterns that the human's translators indicated meant extreme excitement. No one has ever asked me about the technical aspects before. Most species can barely process the basic sound, let alone want to understand the complexity behind it. She immediately launched into an explanation of how Zephyrian bioluminescence was controlled by the same neural pathways that processed music, creating an involuntary synesthetic response that allowed them to literally paint with light while they played. It's like seeing sound, Melodia explained, her skin illustrating her words with color patterns. But for us, it's more like sound creates light. They're the same thing, experienced through different senses. Dr. Webb was furiously taking notes. This could revolutionize human understanding of synesthesia. Would you be willing to participate in some non-invasive neural scans? You want to study me? Melodia asked, her glow brightening with disbelief. Not worship me or write poetry about me, but actually study how my abilities work? Absolutely. Science is about understanding how beautiful things work, not just appreciating that they exist. The interaction between Dr. Webb and Melodia was being watched by hundreds of Zephyrians, all of whom seemed amazed that a member of another species was treating one of their people as a colleague rather than as an object of worship. Meanwhile, Chief Morrison had discovered the Zephyrian engineering displays. Their crystal-growing technology was unlike anything in human experience. But instead of being overwhelmed by the beauty of the structures, Morrison was fascinated by their practical applications. So you're telling me, Morrison said to a group of Zephyrian engineers, that you can grow these crystal matrices to specific structural requirements just by adjusting the mineral composition of your growth medium? Yes, replied the lead engineer, a stocky Zephyrian whose skin showed golden patterns. But most species are too distracted by the visual beauty of the process to understand the technical aspects. Morrison laughed. Son, I've been building things for 40 years. Something can be pretty and useful at the same time. In fact, the best engineering solutions usually are. Now, show me how you calculate load-bearing requirements for a crystal matrix. The Zephyrian engineers looked at each other in amazement, then began eagerly explaining their construction techniques. Soon they had Morrison suited up in a protective outfit, ready to participate in a crystal-growing demonstration. Captain Sarah found herself in conversation with Zephyrian philosophers and political leaders. For the first time in their history, they were able to discuss their ideas with members of another species who weren't too overwhelmed to engage in meaningful dialogue. Our society has become isolated, explained a philosopher named Aurelius, whose skin showed complex geometric patterns as he spoke. We've developed incredible insights into beauty, harmony, and the nature of existence itself, but we've had no one to share these ideas with. Other species either worship us as gods or avoid us entirely. That must be incredibly frustrating, Sarah replied. Humans believe that the best ideas come from sharing and building on each other's thoughts. What kind of insights have your people developed? Aurelius glowed brighter with excitement. We spent thousands of years studying the relationship between beauty and truth, the connection between harmony and peace, the ways that aesthetic experiences can lead to deeper understanding of reality itself. That sounds like something our philosophers would love to discuss. We've had similar debates about the relationship between art and truth, though I suspect your perspectives are quite different from ours. The conversation that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Two species, both intelligent and thoughtful, but with completely different perspectives shaped by their unique experiences, explored questions about reality, beauty, consciousness, and the nature of existence itself. As the day continued, more and more Zephyrians joined the conversations. Scientists presented research they had never dared share with other species. Artists displayed works that had been considered too overwhelming for non-Zephyrian eyes. Musicians performed compositions that combined their natural bioluminescence with complex harmonies in ways that created entirely new art forms. And through it all, the humans reacted normally, asking questions, offering insights, sharing their own knowledge, and treating the Zephyrians as equals and colleagues. "This is unprecedented," Ambassador Lyralii said to Sarah as the sun began to set over the Crystal City. "In one day, your people have engaged more meaningfully with our culture than all other species combined in the past 1,000 years." Sarah watched her crew scattered throughout the plaza, all deeply engaged in conversations or demonstrations with their Zephyrian hosts. Lieutenant Rodriguez was learning to play a bioluminescent musical instrument. Chief Morrison was helping to construct a crystal sculpture. Dr. Webb was documenting everything with the enthusiasm of a scientist who had discovered an entirely new field of study. "Ambassador, I think the reason is simple," Sarah said. "We don't see you as impossibly beautiful beings who are too perfect to relate to. We see you as people, incredibly gifted people, certainly, but still people with thoughts and feelings and dreams just like anyone else." "But how?" Lyralii asked. "How do you see past the overwhelming nature of our appearance?" Sarah thought for a moment, watching a group of human and Zephyrian children playing together in the glowing gardens. The Zephyrian children's skins sparkled with laughter, while the human children seemed completely comfortable with their luminescent playmates. "Maybe it's because humans learned early that beauty comes in many forms," Sarah said finally. "We've seen beauty in sunsets and storms, in flowers and rocks, in faces that are completely different from each other. We've learned that beauty is something to appreciate, not something that should make you stop thinking." She turned to face Lyralii directly. "Your people are incredibly beautiful, yes, but beauty doesn't make someone less of a person. If anything, it makes us more curious about who you are beneath that beauty." As the festival's first day came to an end, the humans prepared to return to their embassy. But they weren't alone. Dozens of Zephyrians accompanied them, eager to continue conversations that had barely begun. For the first time in thousands of years, the Zephyrians had found a species that could see them completely. Their beauty and their minds, their gifts and their personalities, their incredible abilities, and their simple desires for friendship and understanding. And the humans had discovered something remarkable about themselves. Their ability to appreciate beauty without being overwhelmed by it wasn't a limitation or a lack of sensitivity. It was a strength that allowed them to build bridges where others could only stare and wonder. The real cultural exchange was just beginning. 2 weeks into the cultural exchange, the news of humanity's unique relationship with the Zephyrians had spread throughout the galaxy. The implications were staggering. For the first time in galactic history, a species had been found that could interact normally with the Zephyrians, opening possibilities for cooperation that had been impossible for thousands of years. Captain Sarah Chun stood in the communications center of the human embassy, reviewing the flood of messages that had arrived from across known space. Every major galactic power wanted to understand how humans had achieved what they considered impossible. "Captain," Lieutenant Rodriguez said, looking up from his communication console, "we're receiving priority transmission from the Galactic Council, the Caraxian Empire, the Vorthai Confederation, and at least 12 other major civilizations. They all want the same thing." "Let me guess," Sarah replied with a wry smile. "They want to know our secret for resisting Zephyrian beauty." "That's just the beginning," Rodriguez continued, pulling up the message list. "The Caraxian Empire is offering to trade their entire database of military technology for what they call human immunity protocols. The Vorthai want to send their most beautiful representatives to test whether humans are truly immune to all forms of overwhelming beauty. And the Galactic Council is requesting an emergency session to discuss the implications for interspecies relations." Dr. Webb entered the communications center, his usual excited energy replaced by something that looked like concern. "Captain, we need to talk. I've been analyzing the galactic response to our presence here, and I'm seeing some troubling patterns." Sarah gestured for him to continue. "It's not just curiosity about our immunity to Zephyrian beauty," Dr. Webb explained. "Several species are developing theories about human psychology that, well, let's just say they're not entirely flattering." "What kind of theories?" Dr. Webb activated a holographic display showing intercepts of various galactic communications. The Rigelians believe we must be mentally deficient, unable to process beauty at a normal level. The Centaurans think we're emotionally stunted. The androids have concluded that humans are simply too primitive to appreciate true aesthetic perfection. Sarah felt a familiar stirring of irritation. It was the same dismissive attitude humans had faced throughout their expansion into galactic society. And I suppose they all have suggestions for how to fix our supposed deficiencies? The Caraxians are offering to enhance our brains to make us more sensitive to beauty, Rodriguez added. The Vorthai want to study us to understand what's wrong with our aesthetic perception. And the Rigelians are suggesting that humans should be classified as a beauty-blind species and given special accommodations. Before Sarah could respond, Ambassador Lyralii entered the communications center. The Zephyrian leader's bioluminescent skin was showing patterns that the humans had learned indicated anger and frustration. Captain Shun, I must apologize for the behavior of the galactic community, Lyralii said, her melodic voice carrying sharp undertones. We have been monitoring the communications about your people, and what we're hearing is disturbing. What do you mean? They refuse to believe that humans are simply better at seeing us as complete beings rather than just beautiful objects, Lyralii explained. Instead, they've convinced themselves that you must be defective in some way. Some species are even suggesting that humans should be corrected to respond to beauty the way they think you should. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. I see. And what's your people's position on this? Lyralii's skin patterns shifted to deep, rich colors that radiated determination. For the first time in our history, we have found a species that treats us as equals and partners rather than objects to be worshipped or avoided. We will not allow the galactic community to destroy this relationship by trying to fix humans. Dr. Webb looked up from his analysis. Captain, there's something else. I've been studying the historical records, and this pattern has happened before. Whenever a species develops capabilities that challenge established galactic assumptions, there's usually a coordinated effort to either suppress those capabilities or bring them under galactic control. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that our ability to interact normally with the Zephyrians represents a significant shift in galactic power dynamics. The current system depends on the Zephyrians being isolated and unable to form meaningful alliances. If that changes, Sarah understood immediately. The whole galactic political structure could shift. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the communication system. Lieutenant Rodriguez activated the main screen, and the image of an imposing Caraxian admiral appeared. The Caraxians were known throughout the galaxy for their military might and political influence. Human vessel wanderer, the admiral said, his gravelly voice filling the communication center. I am Admiral Thrax of the Caraxian Imperial Fleet. By order of the Galactic Security Council, you will immediately cease all interaction with the Zephyrian population and prepare for mandatory psychological evaluation. Sarah stepped forward, her expression calm but her voice carrying steel. Admiral, with all due respect, humans are not members of the Galactic Security Council, and we don't recognize their authority over our diplomatic missions. The Caraxian's features darkened. Captain, you don't understand the danger you're creating. The Zephyrians have been isolated for good reason. Their beauty is a powerful force that has destabilized entire civilizations when mishandled. Your species' apparent immunity is clearly some kind of genetic defect that needs to be studied and corrected before it causes catastrophic consequences. Behind Sarah, she could hear Ambassador Lyralii's bioluminescence brightening dangerously, and the musical undertones of the Zephyrian language as Lyralii spoke quietly to someone off-screen. Admiral, Sarah replied carefully, we've had no problems interacting with the Zephyrians. In fact, the cultural and scientific exchange has been remarkably productive. I fail to see what danger you're referring to. The danger, Captain, is that your interactions are fundamentally unnatural. Every species in the galaxy responds to Zephyrian beauty in predictable ways. Your failure to do so indicates a serious deficiency that could spread if left unchecked. Dr. Webb stepped forward. Admiral, with respect, our deficiency consists of treating the Zephyrians as intelligent beings worthy of normal social interaction rather than as objects to be worshipped or avoided. If that's a defect, it's one we're proud to have. The Caraxian Admiral's expression grew even more threatening. Doctor, you clearly don't understand the natural order of galactic society. Beauty of the Zephyrian level is meant to inspire awe and reverence, not casual conversation. Your species' inability to respond appropriately suggests a fundamental flaw that could undermine thousands of years of stable interspecies relations. Ambassador Lyralii moved into the view of the communication screen, her presence immediately causing the Caraxian Admiral to step back and shield his eyes. Admiral Thrax, Lyralii said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the air shimmer. Perhaps you should consider that the flaw is not in the humans, but in a system that has kept my people isolated for millennia simply because other species cannot control their reactions to us. Even through the screen, the Admiral was clearly struggling to maintain composure in the face of Lyralii's presence. Ambassador, you don't understand. Humans are dangerous. Their immunity could lead to what? Lyralii pressed. To my people finally being able to participate fully in galactic society, to scientific and cultural exchanges that have been impossible for thousands of years, to the possibility that beauty and intelligence can coexist without one overwhelming the other. The Admiral was clearly becoming more distressed by the moment. Your people, the natural order, this cannot be allowed to continue. Sarah watched the exchange with growing understanding. It wasn't just that other species found Zephyrians overwhelmingly beautiful. They had built their entire concept of galactic hierarchy around that fact. The Zephyrians were placed in a special category, isolated and worshipped, but never truly integrated into galactic society. Humans, by treating Zephyrians as normal people, were threatening that entire system. Admiral, Sarah said firmly, I think this conversation is over. Humans will continue our diplomatic and cultural exchange with the Zephyrians according to our own judgment. If the Galactic Security Council has concerns about this, they can file a formal diplomatic protest. The Admiral's image flickered as he struggled to respond coherently while looking at Ambassador Lyralii. This is not over, Captain. The galaxy will not allow this disruption to continue. There are forces greater than your small human fleet. The communication cut off abruptly, leaving the Embassy Communications Center in tense silence. Well, Chief Morrison said as he entered the center, I'm guessing that didn't go very well. We just detected at least 6 different fleets moving toward the Zephyrian system. Sarah felt her stomach sink. How long until they arrive? Based on their current trajectories, the fastest ships will be here in 18 hours. The largest fleet, looks like Caraxian heavies, will arrive in 36 hours. Dr. Webb was rapidly analyzing incoming data. Captain, I'm detecting massive communications traffic between all major galactic powers. They're coordinating something big. Ambassador Lyralii's bioluminescence had shifted to deep, pulsing patterns that the humans had learned indicated serious concern. Captain Shun, I fear we have underestimated how threatening our friendship appears to the galactic establishment. They seem prepared to use military force to separate us. Sarah moved to the main communications console and opened a channel to her ship. Wanderer *, this is Captain Shun. All senior staff, report to the surface immediately. We have a situation developing. Within minutes, her entire command crew had beamed down to the embassy. Sarah briefed them quickly on the developing situation. So, they're sending fleets to force us to stop interacting normally with the Zephyrians? Asked Commander Hayes, her first officer. Because our immunity to their beauty threatens the galactic order? That's the situation, Sarah confirmed. Lieutenant Rodriguez was monitoring communications traffic. Captain, we're receiving emergency messages from Earth Command. They've been contacted by the Galactic Council, and ordered to recall us immediately. Earth is being threatened with economic and military sanctions if they don't comply. Sarah felt the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. Earth was still a relatively young member of galactic society, dependent on trade relationships and technological exchange with more advanced civilizations. The threat of sanctions could devastate human space expansion and development. But as she looked around at her crew and the Zephyrian representatives who had gathered in the embassy, Sarah realized that some things were more important than political convenience. "Commander Hayes," Sarah said quietly, "what's your assessment of our defensive capabilities against multiple galactic fleets?" "Against one fleet? We might have a chance. Against 6 or more, we'd be outgunned and outnumbered." Ambassador Lyralii stepped forward, her bioluminescence now showing determined silver patterns. "Captain, we cannot ask you to sacrifice your ship and your people for our sake. Perhaps it would be better if you return to your space before the fleets arrive." Sarah looked at the Zephyrian leader for a long moment, then at her crew, then at the beautiful crystalline city visible through the embassy walls where humans and Zephyrians were still working together, learning from each other, and building friendships that had seemed impossible just weeks before. "Ambassador," Sarah said finally, "humans have a saying, some things are worth fighting for. The right of your people to be treated as equals rather than objects, the right of humans to form friendships based on respect rather than appearances, the right to challenge systems that keep entire civilizations isolated. These seem like things worth fighting for." She turned to her crew. "I won't order anyone to stay for this. It's going to be dangerous, and Earth Command has officially ordered us to withdraw. Anyone who wants to return to the ship and head home has my permission and my understanding." The silence that followed lasted for several seconds. Then, Chief Morrison spoke up. "Captain, I've been working with Zephyrian engineers for 2 weeks now. They're the most brilliant constructors I've ever met, and they're also good people who happen to be beautiful. If the galaxy wants to keep them locked away just because other species can't handle looking at them, then the galaxy is wrong." Dr. Webb nodded firmly. "The scientific discoveries we've made here could benefit all of known space. Keeping the Zephyrians isolated is not just unjust, it's a waste of incredible potential." One by one, every member of the human crew voiced their intention to stay and stand with their new Zephyrian friends. Ambassador Lyralii's bioluminescence brightened to levels the humans had never seen before, casting rainbow patterns throughout the embassy. "In all our history," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "no species has ever stood with us against the rest of the galaxy. You truly are remarkable beings." Sarah activated the communication system and opened a general broadcast channel that would reach every approaching fleet. "This is Captain Sarah Chun of a human vessel Wanderer. We are conducting peaceful diplomatic and cultural exchanges with our Zephyrian hosts. Any attempt to interfere with these legitimate activities will be considered an act of aggression against both humans and Zephyrians." She paused, looking around at the faces of her crew and her Zephyrian allies. "Furthermore, we reject the premise that there is something wrong with humans for being able to treat the Zephyrians as equals. The problem is not with human psychology, but with a galactic system that reduces entire civilizations to single characteristics and then isolates them based on other species' inability to cope with their differences." The response from the approaching fleets was immediate and hostile, but Sarah was no longer listening. She was watching her crew and the Zephyrians working together to prepare for what was coming, and she realized that regardless of what happened next, they had already achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had proven that different species could see past appearances to value each other as complete beings, and that understanding was worth defending against any force that tried to destroy it. The first ships arrived exactly when Chief Morrison had predicted. 6 massive vessels dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian system, their weapons powered but not yet targeted. Captain Sarah Chan stood in the operations center that the humans and Zephyrians had hastily constructed, watching the tactical displays with growing concern. Caraxian heavy cruiser, Vorthai diplomatic vessel, Rigelian science ship, and 3 ships I can't identify, reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from his sensor station. They're maintaining distance, but they've definitely got us surrounded. Dr. Webb looked up from his analysis console. Captain, I'm detecting some very interesting energy signatures from those unknown ships. The Zephyrians might want to take a look at this. Ambassador Lyralii moved to the console, her bioluminescent skin immediately shifting to patterns of recognition and surprise. Those are Etherian vessels, she said, her musical voice carrying undertones of concern. They are perhaps the most beautiful species in our local galactic region, even more so than my people. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. Let me guess, they're so beautiful that even Zephyrians have trouble interacting with them? Exactly. We have tried to establish contact for centuries, but even we become overwhelmed in their presence. If the galactic powers have convinced them to come here, they want to test whether humans are truly immune to overwhelming beauty or if we just have a limited resistance, Dr. Webb finished. If the Etherians can overwhelm us the way other species expect, it would prove their theory that we're just not sensitive enough to properly appreciate Zephyrian beauty. Chief Morrison looked up from his engineering displays. Well, we'll find out soon enough. We're being hailed on all frequencies. Sarah moved to the main communication console. Put them through. The main screen split into multiple windows, showing representatives from each of the approaching vessels. Sarah had expected the Caraxian admiral, but she was surprised to see several other species leaders as well. Captain Chun, said a tall, elegant figure whose features seemed to shift like flowing water. I am High Counselor Valen of the Etherian Collective. We have come to resolve this situation. Even through the communication screen, Sarah could feel something unusual about the Etherian representative. There was a quality to their presence that seemed to pull at her attention, an almost hypnotic beauty that was different from, but potentially more powerful than the Zephyrian's crystal clarity. High Counselor, Sarah replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. What situation would that be? The disruption your species is causing to established galactic order, interjected Admiral Thrax from his window. Your claims of immunity to Zephyrian beauty threaten the stability of interspecies relations throughout known space. A third figure appeared on screen, a Vorthai diplomat whose own ethereal beauty had caused wars in the past. Captain, surely you understand that some forces in the universe are meant to inspire awe and reverence. Your species' apparent inability to respond appropriately suggests a fundamental deficiency that must be addressed. Sarah noticed something interesting as the conversation continued. While the various alien leaders spoke, she could see her crew members continuing to work normally around the operations center. Dr. Webb was still analyzing sensor data. Chief Morrison was coordinating defensive preparations with Zephyrian engineers. Lieutenant Rodriguez was maintaining communications with their ship. None of them seemed overwhelmed or distracted by the presence of beings that were supposed to be impossibly beautiful. High Counselor Valen, Sarah said, addressing the Etherian directly, would you be willing to meet in person to discuss this situation? The silence that followed was telling. She could see shock on the faces of the other alien representatives. Captain, Admiral Thrax said urgently, you don't understand what you're asking. Even Zephyrians cannot function normally in the direct presence of Etherians. No species can. It would be fatal to your mental state. Sarah looked at Ambassador Lyralii, who was standing nearby. The Zephyrian leader's bioluminescence was showing patterns of amazement and hope. Ambassador, what's your opinion? Sarah asked. Captain, Lyralii replied, her voice trembling with possibility. If humans can interact normally with Etherians the way you do with us, it would change everything. Not just for our people, but for the entire concept of how different species relate to each other. High Counselor Valen's image seemed to shimmer with increased intensity. Human Captain, are you truly proposing a direct meeting? We have not had meaningful contact with any species for over 5,000 years. Our beauty has become a barrier that isolates us even more completely than the Zephyrians have been isolated. I am proposing exactly that, Sarah replied. If you're willing to try, we are. The communications channel erupted in protest from the other species representatives. This is madness, shouted the Vorthai diplomat. Etherians in direct contact with any species causes immediate psychological collapse. Captain Chun, Admiral Thrax added, even if your species has some limited resistance to beauty, this is beyond anything that has ever been attempted. You're risking not just your own crew, but potentially destabilizing the mental state of every being on that planet. Sarah looked around the operations center at her crew and their Zephyrian partners, all working together on preparations for whatever was coming. These were people who had spent weeks treating impossibly beautiful beings as friends and colleagues without losing their ability to function. High Counselor, she said to the Etherian representative, we would be honored to meet with you in person. Where would be convenient. The silence that followed seemed to stretch across space itself. Finally, High Counselor Valen spoke, their voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond normal hearing. We will transport to your location within 1 hour, Captain Shin. We have never dared to hope for this possibility. The communications ended abruptly, leaving the operations center filled with tense anticipation. Ambassador Lyraliai's bioluminescence was cycling through patterns of excitement, fear, and hope so rapidly that she seemed to be glowing like a living strobe light. Captain, she said, what you are attempting has never been done. Even my people, who are considered among the most beautiful in the galaxy, become completely overwhelmed in Etherian presence. If you can maintain normal interaction with them, then it proves that humans aren't deficient, Dr. Webb finished. It proves that our approach to beauty is fundamentally different from other species, and potentially more healthy. Chief Morrison was running final checks on the embassy's defensive systems. Captain, if this goes wrong, we're going to have 6 alien fleets full of representatives who are convinced that humans are dangerously abnormal. They might decide we're too much of a threat to be allowed to continue existing. Sarah nodded grimly. And if it goes right, we might change how every species in the galaxy relates to each other. Tom, I've seen you work alongside Zephyrian engineers whose beauty could supposedly drive men mad, and you spent most of your time complaining about their safety protocols. Morrison grinned. Their crystalline construction standards are beautiful, Captain, but their load calculation methods could use some work. Exactly 1 hour later, a transport beam unlike anything the humans had ever seen materialize in the embassy's main reception area. The energy patterns were so complex and beautiful that they seemed to create their own music as they formed. When the light faded, 3 figures stood in the center of the room. The Etherians were unlike anything the humans had encountered. Their beauty was not the crystal clarity of the Zephyrians or the flowing elegance of the Vorthai. It was something more fundamental, as if they were living embodiments of the concept of beauty itself. Their forms seemed to shift between different aesthetic ideals, never quite settling on one appearance, but always remaining perfectly beautiful from every angle. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Sarah felt her breath catch, her heart rate increase, and her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. Around her, she could hear sharp intakes of breath from her crew and the sound of Zephyrians falling to their knees in awe. For a moment, the embassy was completely silent, except for the sound of beings struggling to remember how to breathe in the presence of impossible beauty. And then, Chief Morrison's voice cut through the silence like a practical knife. Well, I'll be damned. You folks are even prettier than the Zephyrians. Welcome to our embassy. I'm Tom Morrison, and I gotta ask, how do you manage to maintain those energy patterns without destabilizing your molecular structure? The lead Etherian, High Counselor Valen, turned toward Morrison with an expression of complete amazement. You are asking about our energy patterns? While looking directly at us. Well, Morrison replied matter-of-factly. Don't get me wrong, you're absolutely beautiful, but I'm an engineer. When I see something that beautiful that also defies several laws of physics, I want to know how it works. Dr. Webb had recovered from his initial shock and was now approaching with his scanning equipment. The energy readings are incredible, he said, his scientific curiosity overriding his aesthetic response. Would you mind if I took some non-invasive measurements? This could revolutionize our understanding of exotic matter interactions. High Counselor Valen looked from Morrison to Dr. Webb to Captain Sarah, who had managed to regain her composure and was stepping forward to greet their guests properly. High Counselor, Sarah said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. I'm Captain Sarah Chun. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. The Etherian stared at the offered hand for a long moment, then slowly reached out and took it. The contact sent waves of energy through the room, causing every non-human present to gasp in amazement. You are touching us, Valen whispered, their voice creating harmonics that seemed to make reality itself more beautiful. No one has touched an Etherian in 5,000 years. No one has been able to function in our presence long enough to even try. Around the embassy, the humans were slowly returning to normal function while their Zephyrian friends remained overwhelmed by the combined beauty of both species in the same location. Ambassador Lyralii was struggling to speak coherently, her bioluminescence cycling through every pattern in her emotional range simultaneously. Captain Chun, Valen continued, their amazement growing with each word. Your species is not deficient. You are extraordinary. In all our history, across countless civilizations, no species has ever been able to interact normally with beings of our aesthetic level. Sarah looked around the embassy, where her crew was slowly beginning to engage in normal conversation with their Etherian visitors, while the representatives of other species, visible through the communication links that were still open, watched in complete shock. High Counselor, she said, we don't see you as beings too beautiful to interact with. We see you as people. Incredibly beautiful people, certainly, but still people with thoughts and feelings and purposes beyond your appearance. One of the other Etherians, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. For 5 millennia, we have been alone. Our beauty became a prison that separated us from all other life. Even our own children must be carefully isolated until they learn to control their effects on others. We had given up hope of ever having normal relationships with any other species. Dr. Webb looked up from his scanner readings. This is fascinating. Your energy patterns seem designed to trigger specific neural responses in most species, but humans process aesthetic stimuli differently. We don't have the same overwhelming response to perfection that seems universal among other species. Chief Morrison had begun sketching engineering diagrams with one of the Etherian scientists, completely absorbed in understanding their technology. So, you're telling me these energy fields are naturally occurring? Your people just naturally generate exotic matter interactions? That's the most beautiful engineering I've ever seen. The Etherian scientist stared at Morrison's diagrams. You see our natural abilities as engineering problems to be understood rather than divine forces to be worshipped. Well, sure, Morrison replied. Just because something's beautiful doesn't mean it's not also science. Hell, the best engineering solutions usually are beautiful. Form and function working together. That's what makes something truly elegant. High Counselor Valen turned to Captain Sarah, their forms shimmering with what might have been tears of joy. Captain Chun, your people have given us something we thought was lost forever. The possibility of friendship, of normal interaction, of being valued for our minds, and not just our appearance. Sarah smiled, watching her crew engage in increasingly animated conversations with their Etherian guests, while the Zephyrians slowly recovered enough to join the discussions. Through the communication links, she could see the alien fleet representatives struggling to process what they were witnessing. High Counselor, she said, I think this is just the beginning. If humans can interact normally with both Zephyrians and Etherians, imagine what we could accomplish by working together. But even as she spoke, Sarah was aware that the alien fleets surrounding the planet were still there, and their commanders were still convinced that humanity represented a dangerous disruption to the galactic order. The real test was just beginning. The communication channels erupted in chaos as the alien fleet commanders watched humans interact normally with Etherians, something that no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. Admiral Thrax's voice cut through the cacophony of disbelieving voices. "This is impossible," the Caraxian admiral shouted, his image flickering with interference caused by his own agitation. "No species can function in direct Etherian presence. What you're showing us must be some kind of technological trickery." Captain Sarah Chun looked at the main screen, where multiple alien representatives were arguing among themselves, their carefully maintained diplomatic composure completely shattered by what they were witnessing. "Admiral," Sarah replied calmly, "there's no technology involved. We're simply talking to our guests like we would talk to anyone else." Behind her, the embassy had become a center of unprecedented cooperation. Dr. Webb was collaborating with Etherian scientists on energy manipulation theories that could revolutionize technology throughout the galaxy. Chief Morrison was working with both Zephyrian and Etherian engineers on construction techniques that combined crystal-growing technology with exotic matter manipulation. The possibilities seemed endless. High Counselor Valen stepped into view of the communication screen, their presence immediately causing several of the alien representatives to recoil or shield their eyes even through the transmission. "Honored fleet commanders," Valen said, their voice creating harmonics that made the communication equipment resonate like musical instruments. "Perhaps it is time to reconsider your assumptions about beauty, interaction, and the natural order of galactic society." The Vorthai diplomat, struggling to maintain composure while looking at an Etherian, managed to speak. "High Counselor, how are you able to communicate with these humans without overwhelming them? Even we Vorthai, who pride ourselves on our own aesthetic gifts, cannot function normally in your presence." "That diplomat Erithia is exactly the point," Valen replied. "The humans do not see us as overwhelming forces to be feared or worshipped. They see us as people, beautiful people, certainly, but people nonetheless. They appreciate our appearance while engaging with our minds, our knowledge, and our personalities." Ambassador Lyralii, who had recovered enough to join the conversation, stepped beside Valen. The combined presence of both Zephyrian and Etherian leaders on the same screen caused audible gasps from several alien representatives. "For thousands of years," Lyralii said, her bioluminescence creating light patterns that complemented Valen's energy fields, "both our species have been isolated by the very gifts that make us unique. The galactic community has treated us as objects to be admired from a safe distance, rather than as civilizations with valuable contributions to make. But humans," she continued, her voice growing stronger, "humans see past the surface. They value us for our knowledge, our culture, our science, and our friendship. They have given us something we thought was impossible: normal relationships with another species." Admiral Thrax was clearly struggling to process this information. But the natural order beauty of that magnitude is meant to inspire reverence, not casual conversation. Dr. Webb looked up from his research collaboration with the Etherian scientists. "Admiral, with all due respect, who decided what beauty was meant to inspire? Humans have learned to appreciate beauty without being overwhelmed by it, because we understand that beauty and intelligence, appearance and personality, form and function can all coexist without one canceling out the others." One of the unknown ship commanders finally spoke up. "I am Captain ZYX of the Galactic Enforcement Division. This development changes nothing. Regardless of your species' unusual reactions, the disruption you're causing to establish galactic order cannot be permitted to continue." Sarah felt the atmosphere in the embassy shift. Her crew members, who had been engaged in enthusiastic collaborations with their new alien friends, began moving to defensive positions. The Zephyrians and Etherians, despite their overwhelming beauty, suddenly looked very much like people preparing for a fight. "Captain ZYX," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the steel that had gotten her through years of frontier exploration. What exactly are you planning to enforce? The separation of species that cannot safely interact, ZYX answered. Your presence here has destabilized thousands of years of carefully maintained isolation protocols. The Zephyrians and Etherians must return to their designated zones, and your species must be evaluated for potential threat containment. High Counselor Valen's energy patterns suddenly shifted to configurations that the human equipment registered as dangerous levels of exotic radiation. Captain ZYX, you speak of our isolation as if it were a benefit rather than a prison. For 5,000 years, my people have been alone, cut off from a galaxy, because other species cannot control their reactions to us. Ambassador Lyraliai's bioluminescence shifted to deep red patterns that Sarah had never seen before. And my people have been treated as living artworks rather than as intelligent beings with our own hopes, dreams, and contributions to make. The humans, Valen continued, their form now radiating energy that was making even the communication equipment respond with harmonic resonances, have shown us that interaction between different species doesn't have to be about worship or avoidance. It can be about cooperation, learning, and friendship. Chief Morrison looked up from his engineering schematics, where he had been designing hybrid technologies that combined human, Zephyrian, and Etherian innovations. Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildups for both our friends here and the ships out there. This is about to get very interesting. Sarah made a command decision that would change the course of galactic history. All ships, this is Captain Shun. You are in violation of the sovereignty of both Zephyrian and Etherian space. You have exactly 10 minutes to withdraw to the edge of this system before we consider your presence an act of aggression. The response was immediate and predictable. Captain Shun, Admiral Thrax sputtered, you command a single exploration vessel. You cannot threaten entire battle fleets. Admiral, Sarah replied with a smile that her crew knew meant trouble for someone. You're making the same mistake everyone makes about humans. You're assuming you understand our capabilities based on surface appearances. She turned to her companions. High Counselor Valen, Ambassador Lyraliai, would your people be interested in demonstrating some of the collaborative technologies we've been developing? The two alien leaders looked at each other, then at Sarah. Captain, Valen said, are you proposing what I think you're proposing? I'm proposing that it's time the galaxy learned what happens when species work together as equals instead of maintaining artificial barriers based on fear of beauty. Ambassador Lyraliai's bioluminescence brightened to levels that began affecting the embassy's lighting systems. Our people have spent millennia developing technologies in isolation, combined with human ingenuity and Etherian energy manipulation. We could create something unprecedented, Valen finished. Chief Morrison was already pulling up holographic displays of the hybrid designs they had been working on. Captain, if we can integrate Zephyrian crystal matrix construction with Etherian exotic matter manipulation and human adaptability, we're talking about technologies that could transform galactic civilization. Dr. Webb nodded enthusiastically. The scientific implications alone would justify everything we've done here. Sarah opened a channel to her ship. Wanderer prepare to implement Project Trinity. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked confused. Captain, we don't have any project by that name. We do now, Sarah replied. Integrate all our systems with the technological specifications that Chief Morrison is about to upload. Dr. Webb, prepare for the first three-species collaborative defense demonstration in galactic history. Over the next few minutes, the embassy became a center of activity unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human technology integrated with Zephyrian crystal matrices that were enhanced by Etherian exotic matter manipulation. The result was something that transcended what any single species could have created alone. The Wanderer, in orbit above the planet, began to transform. Crystal formations grown by Zephyrian techniques spread across its hull, while Etherian energy patterns flowed through the structures like living light. Human engineering tied it all together into systems that were both beautiful and incredibly functional. Impossible, whispered Captain ZYX as his sensors register the changes. No one has ever successfully integrated technologies from multiple highly advanced species. That's because, Sarah replied, watching her ship's transformation on the tactical displays. No one has ever tried treating different species as equal partners rather than as threats to be contained or objects to be worshipped. The alien fleets began powering up their weapons systems, but they were too late. The transformed Wanderer was now something beyond their experience. A vessel that combined the best of three species technologies into something that was greater than the sum of its parts. High Counselor Valen and Ambassador Lyrelii stood together in the embassy's control center, their combined presence creating an energy field that enhanced every system in the building. Around them, humans worked alongside Zephyrians and Etherians as if they had been doing so for centuries instead of weeks. Fleet commanders, Sarah broadcast to all approaching ships. You have 5 minutes remaining to withdraw to the system edge. After that, we will demonstrate why cooperation is more powerful than isolation. Admiral Thrax's image appeared on screen one final time, his expression showing a mixture of rage and disbelief. Captain Chun, you cannot threaten the entire galactic order. What you're doing here will be stopped. Admiral, Sarah replied, looking around at her crew and their alien partners all working together with the easy camaraderie of people who saw each other as equals. What we're doing here isn't threatening the galactic order. We're showing what the galactic order could become if it was based on cooperation instead of fear. She paused, watching the tactical display as the alien fleets hesitated, clearly uncertain how to respond to technologies they had never encountered before. The question is, Sarah continued, do you want to be part of building something better, or do you want to be remembered as the species who try to stop it? One by one, the alien fleets began withdrawing to the edge of the system. Some left entirely, their commanders clearly needing time to report these unprecedented developments to their home governments. Others maintained their positions at a respectful distance, their representatives requesting permission to observe the ongoing collaboration. 3 months later, the Zephyrian system had become the center of the most significant diplomatic and scientific revolution in galactic history. Species that had been isolated for millennia were learning to work together. Technologies that had been impossible were becoming routine. And at the center of it all were humans, doing what they had always done best, seeing past surface differences to find the common ground that could bring different peoples together. Dr. Webb stood in the expanded research facility that now occupied 3 crystal-grown buildings, watching teams of humans, Zephyrians, Etherians, and a dozen other species working together on projects that were advancing galactic civilization by centuries with each breakthrough. Captain, he said as Sarah joined him on the observation platform, we've received formal requests from 47 different species asking for mediation assistance. Apparently, our ability to see past overwhelming beauty extends to other kinds of barriers between species. Sarah smiled, watching a group of young Zephyrians playing with human children while their Etherian friends created beautiful light shows for everyone's entertainment. Doctor, I think we've learned something important about beauty, about cooperation, and about what happens when you treat people as people regardless of how different they might appear. What's that, Captain? That the most beautiful thing in the universe isn't how someone looks, Sarah replied, watching the mixed groups of children from different species laughing together as they played. It's what they can accomplish when they work together as equals. High Counselor Valen and Ambassador Lyrelii approached, both of them glowing with contentment and hope. Captain Chun, Valen said, our peoples want to establish a permanent alliance with humanity. Not because you're immune to our beauty, but because you showed us that beauty and equality could coexist. And Lyrelii added, her bioluminescence creating gentle rainbow patterns. Because you taught the galaxy that isolation based on appearance is not protection. It's just loneliness dressed up as wisdom. Sarah looked out at the growing city where 3 species were building something unprecedented together, while representatives from dozens of other civilizations came to learn how cooperation could transcend fear. Ambassadors, she said, I think this is just the beginning. If humans can help bridge the gap between Zephyrians, Etherians, and the rest of the galaxy, imagine what we could accomplish by working together on the really big challenges facing galactic civilization. As the sun set over the Crystal City, painting the sky in colors that rivaled even Etherian beauty, Sarah realized that humanity had found their place in galactic society not by being the strongest or the smartest or the most beautiful, but by being the species that could see past all those differences to the common ground that connected every intelligent being in the universe. And that, she thought as she watched her mixed crew of humans and aliens planning their next collaborative project, might just be the most beautiful thing of all.